Hello, good morning and welcome. This is Sunrise Daily on a Friday morning. I'm Ayo Makinde here in Lagos.
For the past 10 months, these 66 students drawn from several security-affiliated agencies have been at the National Institute for Security Studies, Abuja, upgrading their competence to handle security challenges in the country. Presenting the graduation lecture, the former president speaks on the Almajiri schools he created while in office to reduce the number of out-of-school children.
When I was in office, I have to step in at the time to even attempt to build some schools. Now we call them Almajiri schools. I know that some of the governors probably were not too happy, but then they didn't tell me they were not happy. It was when I left office that I had, but how will the governor not happy? Because we use the federal government money from the University of Basic Education, and it's just to partner with the state.
He goes on to explain the roles local authorities should play in reducing ethnic and religious crisis.
In terms of governance, nothing is happening at the local government level. The community engagement is so weak. I think the states must have strong departments that will coordinate the affairs of this local government.
The former president insists that political conflict frightens investors, recalling the now famous phone call he made to President Muhammadu Buhari to quell tensions in the country following the outcome of the 2015 presidential elections.
Nobody can bring his money to invest in a country where it's not politically stable. And one of the reasons why, as you mentioned, I called Buhari before the announcement of the results is I don't want a situation where people can create problems.
For the former president, whistleblowing is a great tool to fight corruption. However, he calls for caution.
Who give wrong information to security operatives should be punished. In as much as the issue of whistleblowing is okay, it will help to control us. It must be done in a way that we should not use it to injure our economy.
Today's lecture from former President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan was packed full of information on all kinds of things. There is no word yet on whether the former president will be thinking of running for president in the next elections, but the eyes are on him to see what his next moves are. For now, he's more focused on conducting elections across Africa. Kayla Megwa, Channels Television News.
Well, sundry issues, as you have heard Kayla say in that report. So maybe you want to listen to the lecture in full yourself, but there was something strategic in all of it. There is a nexus between security and national development. Without security, there may not be national development the way we have it in mind. And he also drew a very important, very critical point in the fact that there isn't significant engagement with the people, especially at the grassroots level. In other words, according to the former president, local government doesn't seem to be there. It's just local government for the sake of the name and just to tick the box in the Constitution. The effect of the local government doesn't seem to be as felt as it was in time past. Permit me to refer again to something that we have talked about on this program a number of times, which is the fact that this pandemic we are fighting, if we had an efficient local government system, as the former president mentioned, and as the current president of the Senate has also mentioned, that we need to expedite work on strengthening the local government infrastructure, we will not have the kind of challenge we're having with COVID-19 now, or cholera, or Lassa fever, or any of these issues, any of these diseases that are becoming epidemic or endemic in our system right now. Because back then we had environmental sanitation officers, Yorubas call them wole wole. They would come into your house to check as little as the water you drink, the drainage in your homes or in front of your houses. It's a long walk to national development with the way we have it in mind, but how about taking these baby steps? When we talk about development, we're looking at the national level. How about the states? How about the local governments? Most certainly, one crucial thing that we all need to agree is there cannot be national development without a focus Because we need to define what national development is, what development is for us as a nation. In what way are we going? What's the direction of our national development? Every organization has a vision. Every organization has a focus, has a direction. What's ours as a nation? That question is still begging answers, so everyone can key in. Good morning, Malkwe.
Good morning, Ayo. Well, very interesting conversation which you've kick-started this morning on national development. And I think that every time I'm on my way to work, I always ponder on, what it would take for development to get to the grassroots, to get to communities. And I think that the former president is right on the money in terms of the disconnect between local governments and the people. The fact that our local governments are now so weak, if at all they exist, to the point where there's almost no governance. In fact, there's no governance. It's not a question of almost, because the local governments that are shut throughout most of the month, then end of the month, when salaries are paid, they're active for maybe 2-3 days, or perhaps a week at most, and after that, they're shut again. I know that from experience, and I don't think anything has changed. Maybe 1 or 2 states might be working to change that. Maybe 1 or 2 states might be saying, let's see how we can get local governments working. Or maybe a few governors are challenging, it could be caretaker chairman that they put there, or when they do conduct local government elections, maybe a few governors are trying to, rouse the local governments in their states to action. But many states that we know, local government system is non-existent. Now, as for the president saying that he didn't know that governors were not happy with him when he built our Almajiri schools, I find it interesting that he's given this talk to people drawn from the security agencies. And you know that the security agencies don't work in silos. I mean, they ought not to work in silos. They're supposed to function more with intelligence. We talk about intelligence-driven operations, intelligence-driven investigation, and all whatnot. Now, there is a new buzzword, which is emotional intelligence, which some people find very important in dealing with people. Is extremely important in the workplace, is extremely important between leaders and the led, between bosses and their subordinates, even between subordinates and their bosses. You find that a lot of subordinates who actually do make headway are those who are emotionally intelligent. And the other way around, because if you're emotionally intelligent as a boss with your subordinate, the chances that you'll be more productive, either in your company or even at home. Because if you have staff at home and you're not emotionally intelligent with them, you'll just be you'll be meeting brick walls. So the question was, for me, was if the president was also asking them to imbibe. Yes, they are intelligence agencies, they're intelligence officers, some of them involved largely in operations. Was he telling them to imbibe emotional intelligence alongside whatever form of intelligence they gather? Because really, these things that are not spoken, and there are entire modules dealing with this in business schools, these things that are often are new areas of exploration have now come up as a result of what people have found, that you need to be emotionally intelligent when dealing with people. Now, maybe you can call it sensitivity. You need to be sensitive when dealing with people. It would be very interesting to listen to the length of the president's speech, especially since at some point he also spoke from his heart. Veiled reference, if you ask me, to the attack on the Supreme Court Justice Mary Odili, and how whistleblowing went wrong in that instance. It would seem that the president is also adding his voice. He didn't quite mention it in clear terms, but that's the latest example of a whistleblower and whistleblower with people allegedly working for security agencies who had nothing, whom the authorities have now denied. We don't even know how the case is going. Where is it at? One of the problems that we have. 1 minute we're on something, the next minute another thing has come on and it has taken over. But it's a good thing that the president is bringing it back to our attention. If indeed the authorities did not have any hand in that, what has become of the investigation into the invasion or the siege on the home of Justice Mary Odili? Ayo.
You've asked. I don't know if we should even think about starting another countdown on that, but please don't even get me started. But the issues that have been raised are definitely succinct, and as you said, it'll be good to listen to what the former president has said in that speech, because the road to national development is quite a long one. Let's take a look at our papers this morning. Let's begin with the Leadership Friday this morning, and this is what you have on its front page. Seems the leadership has started its own countdown. 16 days to go. Lawmakers ready to override PMB's veto on electoral bill. Stories on page 4. And look at the writers. Present National Assembly lacks courage to overrule president. Says who? Wike, that's the governor of Rivers State. Find out more details on the inside pages. CSOs regroup, demand president's assent. All of that you'll find in the story on the flip pages. Aisha Buhari seeks special court for rape. Story is on page 8. Find the details on the inside pages of that one. And of course, PMB Obasanjo governors mourn Joseph Wires, who is a former president of the Senate in this country. Page 7 has that one. That's the Leadership Friday today.
Well, The Guardian has this, International Day of Persons with Disabilities. That's on the front page. 31 million PLWDs suffer as 23 states neglect disability rights. MDAs yet to implement Buhari's directive 3 years after disability law passage. Government, private sector charged to promote disability inclusion. Page 6 will give you details there. You also have at the bottom, Nigeria ranks 9th, needs $1.1 billion for humanitarian assistance in 2022. 120 NGOs task world leaders to halt escalating hunger. Humanitarian minister urges developed nations to fulfill $100 billion yearly pledge to support climate action. So those are the lead stories on the front page of The Guardian for you. And look at this one. 11 killed as herders, farmers clash in Taraba. When is this going to end? When are we going to stop seeing clashes between farmers and herders? 11 people losing their lives needlessly. Well, you find details on page 8. Let's leave it there for The Guardian.
Flip to the Nigerian News Direct. You know, those issues that you raised, I am just hoping that I will be able to address them. I don't know. Nigerian News Direct has this one on its lead front page. Only 10% of 350,000 police workforce enjoy suitable accommodation. Wow, that's ascribed to the Inspector General of Police. Serving in Nigerian force equals living in penury. That's ascribed to a police officer. Recall that report of that special report from Channels Television about the facilities provided for the police. Well, this is the IGP now saying this. Perhaps we also need to take a second look at it. 10% of the 350,000 police workforce, that's only 35% of them enjoy suitable accommodation. Wow. How encouraging can their work be? Well, that's what you have on the front page of the Nigerian News Direct this morning. Above that nameplate, among others, End SARS, I'll join Sanwo-Olu for peace walk. That's ascribed to Segun Awosanya. Find the details on the inside pages. Buildings collapse. Enforce monitoring of structures to prevent recurrence. Surveyors urge FG. All of that you find on the front page. And Dakuku laments collapse of government agencies, parastatals under Wike. Stories on page 2 of the Nigerian News Direct this morning.
Let's look at New Telegraph now. 2023, PDP governors abandon power shift, jostle for vice presidential Senate tickets. Mimiko may take over from Ayu if Northern president emerges. That's someone speaking. It's on page 2 of the paper. You also see this Story, Nambe oil spill, leaking wellhead to be contained in days. That's a long time away, it would seem. Days is a long time when, you know, something is spilling continuously into a natural environment. Affected communities get 5 truckloads of palliatives. Okay, you might want to see details on page 5. Only 7.2 million Nigerians have pension plans, that's according to a report. PFAs should improve payment method. That's someone speaking EFNA, or I should just say EFINA. Maybe you'll understand it better. Page 3 will give you details. And look at this at the bottom. Application to quash treason charge. Court reschedules hearing of Kanu's case till January 18, 2022. Orders DSS to allow defendant change clothes, practice his faith. Page 3 is where you find details. You have a number of other stories just beneath the nameplate, but just one is one I'll highlight. NCAA grants Anambra right to operate light aircraft. Says only visual flights allowed for now. That's daytime flights allowed for now. So the airport in Anambra has now been given permission to be fully functional. Let's leave it there for New Telegraph.
The Daily Independent is interested in the 2023 elections. 2023 presidential election. Choosing PDP candidate will be turbulent. Again, Governor Wike is the one talking about that one. Find the details on the front page, continues on the inside pages. Has one rider, alleges plan by APC to rig 2023 elections. The details are on the inside pages. Right under the picture you see there, FG hasn't learned from NSAS protests. Utomi, Anya, Momodu, all of that you'll find details on the front page, continues on the inside pages. Above the nameplate, society at risk from technology and new media, as ascribed to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Bajabia Mila. A number of other stories you might want to pick from. Kaduna to dismiss 233 teachers over fake certificates. That story is on page 6. Is that another? Here we go again. That's the Daily Independent this morning.
Oh, what does the Vanguard have on the front page this morning? They have this one, AMCON, Senate, Aviation Ministry at war over new national carrier. It hasn't even taken off. And there's already a battle, it would seem. Ministry frustrating takeoff of Nigerian Eagle Airline by AMCON. That's according to the Senate. Direct AMCON to republish list of debtors. We're not in charge of issuance of AOCs, says Aviation Minister Sirika. There have been a lot of talk about how AMCON has taken over a few airlines, aero contractors, Arik Air is another one, and that if we're going to start Nigerian Air, since AMCON is already a national, it's a parastatal of the federal government, perhaps we could use the planes it already has within its control to start an airline. I mean, that conversation has been ongoing, but I don't know what this is about. You might want to take page 5 of the Vanguard to give you details, but this is what they report in AMCON, Senate, Aviation Ministry at war over new national carrier. Details are right there for you. You have a number of other stories. Fleeing inmates, we're not safe. Just residents cry out. Yes, there will be consequences as a result of either suspected criminals or convicted criminals on the loose. So page 20 is where you also find details to that. How to deepen Nigeria's democracy, U.S. envoy Falana Ekwu, others is on page 10. You have a lot of stories on the front page of Vanguard newspapers this morning. Of course, you also have Mr. and Mrs. Perhaps it's a Friday. Maybe we should take a look at it. Mr. or Mrs. is the one speaking first. She says, I don't understand you anymore. I need to be convinced that you're the loving man I married. And Mr. says, when the federal government starts paying the 5,000 naira monthly fuel subsidy grant, I'll give you half of mine. Mrs. will have to be patient to show Mr. Prove his love in real terms. But who knows? Persian dogs do eat fat bulls. The question is whether they still do in Nigeria. They do. They do. They do. Anyway, let's leave it there for Vanguard.
Okay, well, I do not envy Mr. at that point. But then is Mrs. assuaged? That's another thing altogether. Just 2,500 naira. Why not give it all and add some more to it? But I don't know. I'm not Mr. and I'm not Mrs. The Daily Times this morning has this one: Nigeria's security trauma will be over soon. That's ascribed to the Vice President. Says, breakup not solution to nation's problems. The details are on the front page. The story continues on the inside pages. Above the nameplate, Kaduna said to dismiss 233 teachers with fake certificates. A couple of riders schedules fresh competency tests for 12,254 others. NUT OK's move to disengage teachers with fake certificates. The details are on the front page, continues on the inside pages of the paper this morning. Several others. 2023, Kalu Umahi plot to return to PDP, chieftain alleges. What does that mean? The details are on the inside pages, and right under that one, 274 million people will be in need worldwide in 2022. That's ascribed to the United Nations. Find the details on page 3 of the paper this morning. Markwe.
Daily Trust has this on the front page: Omicron, crude oil drops below $70 as travel ban threatens recovery. That's the lead story on the front page of Daily Trust newspapers. Restrictions will affect Nigeria's economy. That's according to experts. Aviation sector at risk. That's from IATA. And I think it's all just unfair, really, when you think about it. The fact that Omicron was already in existence, and it was only because South Africa brought it to the fore that these new restrictions have come up again. So now that we know that it was already there, it was just that South Africa raised the alarm about finding it in their country following protocols that have been laid down. Will these travel restrictions not change? Those are the questions we should be asking. Aviation sector at risk. IATA is the one speaking. You have this as well. 2022 MPC plans e-census in security risk areas. Court to DSS give Kanu maximum comfort in detention. And look at this. Police arrest 13 as thugs attack Barral's campaign office in Kano. That's also on the front page. Let's leave it there for Daily Trust newspapers.
Very quickly, Nigerian Tribune has this one: bandits attacks, 10 students killed, 780 abducted, 61 in captivity. That's ascribed to Amnesty International. Escalating attacks targeting children endanger right to education. If you ask me, I'll say it even endangers the future. But the details you'll find on page 2 of the Nigerian Tribune. Above the nameplate, how lawmakers' aides use own companies to obtain government contracts. How lawmakers' aides use own companies to obtain government contracts. Ascribed to ICPC report. Is that ICPC whistleblowing or what? The details you'll find on page 25 of the Nigerian Tribune this morning. Under the picture you see there, over 172.7 million Nigerians now live in dirty environments. Again, ascribed to a report. The story is on page 26 of the Nigerian Tribune this morning. And with the Nigerian Tribune, we wrap up a look at the papers this morning. After now, it's straight to the issues. Stay with us.
Well, yesterday we started a conversation around corruption, cost of, I'm trying to remember now for the life of me, but yes, corruption was a lead topic which we had yesterday and was based on ICPC's third national summit, which they organized here in Abuja just on Wednesday, or that Tuesday, it was on Tuesday, I believe. And then there were lots of revelations from the speech of the ICPC chairman. The president was also there. The judiciary was also very well represented. So was the Senate. And it was seen that everybody was bringing out their different scorecards, what they've done in terms of trying to stem the tide of corruption in Nigeria. Don't forget that one of the cardinal arms upon which this government was elected when it promised to, when it was going to assume office, was that it promised to fight corruption, it promised to tackle insecurity, and it also promised to improve the economy. Now there's been a lot of focus on what exactly is happening on corruption. Yesterday we spoke with the CEO of Budget, excuse me, an NGO which has focused heavily on looking at Nigeria's budget and how it is that we're implementing that document, which is like the contract between the government and the people. It helps it implement, you know, the plans that it has for the Nigerian people, and how we're faring in terms of stemming corruption and stopping leakages within that budget. It came out that the budget said that they had before had raised an alarm that about 300 or so line items in the budget had been duplicated. According to them, that there was some contention over that, but that they feel vindicated because the ICPC, as the Independent Corrupt Practices Commission, has come out to say that they also noticed about 257 duplicated items in the budget. Well, we have some response because those manning the budget, preparing the budget, excuse me, are concerned about these revelations, and I'm sure that they'll have some responses as well as to why we're still seeing this figures. It has come down drastically from what we used to see, but nonetheless, they're still there. So we have with us this morning Mr. Ben Akabweze, who is the Director General of the Budget Office. Sir, you're welcome to Sunrise Daily.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
It's good to see you again. Incidentally, you were at that third national summit of the ICPC, and I'm sure you heard some of the comments of the ICPC chairman, who, you know, in his speech reeled out a few things that were of concern to a lot of Nigerians, not least the employment syndicate, which was uncovered by the ICPC. So let's start with the first one, which is about budget padding. For a lot of Nigerians, this is something that used to, you know, come up every time we talked about the budget. Is it still in existence, budget padding?
Well, first of all, it depends on what you mean by budget padding. I think that term, budget padding, is one that I think trips Nigerians, and they've fallen in love with it. Until 5 years ago, that term didn't exist in our budget lexicon in Nigeria. In 2016, there was the exposure that people had essentially both at the level then of the budget office and the National Assembly at the different stages of the budget process, that people had introduced projects into the budget that were not approved. That's what originally was termed budget padding. Today, it's become a catch-all phrase for anything that people consider wrong with the budget. But if by budget padding you mean, for instance, the duplicated projects that issue, yes, okay. The ICPC, okay, came up with a report which they sent to us about duplicated projects that they found to be duplicated in the budget. We did our own review. We found 54 of those projects were not actually duplications, but there were issues with descriptions, project descriptions, which made them look like the same, but they were not the same. Every project in the budget has a unique identifier. And the ones which were found to indeed be duplicated, release funding was withheld from from such projects.
So how many
and
did you
let me
find?
say,
How many did you agree with the ICPC were
there
duplicated?
were 185 from the list that we received. 185 were found to it be duplicated. 54 were not. But let's put this in context. While we're pushing, and you admitted yourself that it's much better, and while we're striving for a zero tolerance for such thing, let's put this in context. In the years in the 2021 budget, you have about 20,000 projects. If out of 20,000 projects, you found 200, as duplicated, that is 0.01% of the total project. Even by the ICPC, said those projects were valued at 20 billion naira. The total MDA's capital budget for 2021 is just under 4 trillion naira. So again, in value terms, that is 0.005% of the value. So while it sounds really, now when people hear this, the point is, and remind me, I'm not saying that is the thing, but every system, okay, you have a level of tolerance in terms of error. At the end of the day, it's human beings that prepare this. Some may be erroneous, some may be willful, duplication. But the important thing is that, there is a self-correcting mechanism. The best of systems around the world have audits attached to them because there is an acknowledgement that something can go wrong. The important thing is to have a self-correcting mechanism.
So ICPC,
we work collaboratively with the ICPC.
ICPC scrutiny of the budget is part of the process.
Yes, that's correct. And it's not just they have different roles assigned to them. It's not just that. For instance, they have a role to monitor and track implementation of constituency projects in the budget. So they have it's part of government self-correcting mechanism.
Well, they have expanded that mandate now to not just constituency projects, so also executive projects.
No, I understand. I said, for example.
Okay, for example.
They have that. They have that as a specific mandate, and some of these they're not exclusive mandates. So, for instance, the mandate to review constituency projects, the Ministry of Special Duties also has the same mandate. So again, these help when you have multiple agencies reviewing these things. In terms of how the budget is prepared, the budget isn't uploaded on the system by the budget office personnel. What we do is we take the resources when we determine the amount of resources that are going to be available for the every fiscal period. These resources are further broken into individual ceilings for MDAs based on the underpinning government development plan, based on government's priorities for the period. And every agency has a ceiling for their expenditure. From their offices, they go on and upload their budget onto the budget preparation system. What the budget office personnel do is then go into the system and review what they have uploaded for consistency with plan, for conformity with the guidelines laid out in the budget call circular. And in that process, if 100 guys are reviewing 20,000 projects, if they miss the spot education of 200, this thing, I'm not sure that it answers all of the thing, especially when there is a self-correcting mechanism to ensure that.
In fairness
that's not...
to your office, I do know that in the conversation we had with budget yesterday, they were very particular that in fact indices of transparency have improved. That there seems to be more processes through which all of these things can be caught. In fact, they admit that their work has been made easier because they can easily go online and check a lot of these things, and that's because of the processes that government has put in place. However, the missing link for them is accountability. You talked about how when these things are discovered, that funds are withheld. Is that where it stops?
Well, you know, we have our own, job description. We have the limits of our own authority. When it's discovered, the most that on our own part that we can do is, withhold release of funds to those specific projects.
You cannot
the
report?
ICPC,
You cannot...
No, the ICPC has already reported. It's produced a report. So, it's taken from there. They have investigative, powers. So they actually pull in the people involved to investigate whether these are willful, actions intended to, to defraud government, or whether they are erroneous. And depending on the determination that they make, they take it forward. They are the ones with the authority to do so. We don't.
But do you refer to them? Do you say, this is what we've noticed in the process of compiling, in the process of, putting all of this together? Do you give them notes as well?
You mean while we are preparing the budget?
Indeed.
Well, the truth is, at that point in time, anything that we spot, we take care of. The thing is, we in the budget office, we tend to do our work and, get going with, with the work without a lot of sensationalism. But as you said, even the budget person, acknowledge that. They say, and if you don't believe us or don't even believe the budget people, the International Budget Partnership, check their reports, check the World Bank, public expenditure and fiscal accountability reports for 2012 and 2019 and compare them. There's, significant progress, but we continue to work to make it, better. As I said, we are working towards a zero level of such, applications. And what happens is every time that we find that there's still such this thing, we continue to, but there are individuals who are on a full-time basis just seeking for means to game the system.
Mm-hmm. And that's why I was saying that if you notice, I don't think there will be anything wrong with blowing a whistle or calling the authorities who are supposed to be in charge, especially if you suspect that it could be willful. But let me change gears.
There are areas where we work, for instance, on the matters of illegal recruitments and whatever like this. When we do our review and spot this thing, we scream, and they take it from there to actually then follow through with the people who have committed such infractions.
Illegal recruitment is another kettle of fish, and I'll come to that in just a moment. What I'd like to focus on is also in terms of capital expenditure. Just as I was telling Mr. Okeowo yesterday, and I told him that, look, capital expenditure is about 25% of our budget. There's a whole lot going on with recurrent expenditure, and it would seem that we'll need four different organizations like budget to be able to, scrutinize our entire budget and to be sure that we're truly getting value for money. Looking at capital expenditure again, he talked about certain projects being cited within parastatals or ministries that had absolutely no authority or no powers to be able to carry out such projects. And they brought out a few examples. Have those kinds of examples come to your notice, and what is the budget office doing about it?
Well, the truth is that that, again, is a matter of concern. All I can say to you, remember the budget preparation is a process involving both the executive and the legislative arm of government. What I can say to you, if you take the 2022 budget proposal, for instance, now from the executive, you will not find any, because that's one of the things that the budget office, would check, and that I can assure you. You will not find a project, okay, in an MDA's budget that is outside of their mandate. But by the time the budget is done...
So we will not find things like the Nigeria Agricultural Quarantine Service trying to supply and install solar street lights, you know, in 1,000 or 10,000 lumens with, well, they're giving description of this.
You will not find
things like the National
executive
Agency
budget
for
proposal.
Great Green Wall, you know, concerned with provision of street lights.
You will not find such in the you know, in the budget proposal for government. But I mean, from the executive.
Where does this thing come in?
Let me make it whatever, however, okay? Because I mean, you're just raising these specifics. If you take the Great Green Wall, you'll have to be, if you know, in a particular locality when you say, for instance, the agency, the Great Wall, doing a solar project, it's not the staff of whatever there. It's them contracting that. So that's not, you know, that's really something like that.
But it's not their mandate.
No. What's their mandate? Their mandate is
to plant trees.
Precisely. So I'm saying, if in a particular, if they, you know, and I don't know the specifics, but I'm saying, if they have staff in a particular, you know, community that, you know, or they have some office in a particular community out there in that Sahel region where where they are working, and they have an outpost there. If they have this thing to do solar, to bring power to their offices in that place, a solar power project will be what will make sense. If they have in their budget a contract to do solar power for that particular reason, that will not be outside of their mandate. But if they have in their budget a project to do solar lighting in some whatever communities or some is not for their own purpose, then that will be outside of their mandate.
Well, you have said that we will not see this type of misplaced budget priorities or budget lines in the budget that the executive submits to the National Assembly. What I got from that is that when it has been submitted, there could be other inputs. Is that correct?
Oh yes, that's correct.
Is that still the practice?
in the process of budget formulation. Yes, I mean in the process of interacting with the various agencies, the committees of the National Assembly. Sometimes the budget usually, not sometimes, comes back with some changes from what the executive had proposed. And the National Assembly insists that it is within their constitutional authority to do so. Okay. But it's something around which we continue to engage to make sure that even when that happens, things like, assigning projects to agencies that are outside of their mandate does not occur.
Let us go to Lagos now. Here my colleague has questions for you. Ayo.
Thank you, Mark. Well, Mr. Kabuzi, I recall at some point, not too long ago, just last month, you said something that you said, before, over and over again, that Nigeria's government expenditure is among the world's lowest. And you talked about it's across board, federal, state, and local government levels. So on the one hand, government has a challenge of revenue, because even raising more revenue to increase the budget lines that you have talked about is quite a challenge. But when one finds that, such little things as little as 0.01% of a budget is being subverted, so to speak, it will definitely give one concern, especially since you said that, the Budget Office also found 158 such budget lines duplicated. It is significant in the eyes of some people. So the question then is, and I think my colleague certainly asked this question, are the people who are found, to have imputed those things whether erroneously or deliberately, just as you have also said, are they going to be called to question by the Budget Office or by the ministries, departments, and agencies where they work and that infraction was committed?
Well, I don't know what you want me to say again about that. I have said that, at the level of the budget office, what we do is withhold funding from such projects. And therefore, to that extent, it doesn't create the sort of problem that you alluded to, misuse of the limited resources. As to the discipline of those people, that's not, that's outside of our own that's outside of our own responsibilities. We look to the day where we have, a structure of the budget office, where the budget office can actually deploy its own personnel across the MDAs, just like the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation deploys accountants across all the MDAs, and so it can hold them directly accountable. The staff who are involved in preparing these budgets in these MDAs are not accountable to the budget office. They don't, or to us. So, we have no line of responsibility to discipline them.
Ultimately, it is the budget office that would be called to question, so to speak, because it is the budget office that oversees all of the input from all of these ministries. For instance, one of those other information that we have is a list of 10 agencies, top 10 agencies with duplicate projects. One of them is the Federal Ministry of Health at a time that we are battling such a pandemic as we are. So the question that I'm asking, Mr. Kabweze, is it something that the budget office or the Ministry of Finance will be looking at to compel at least to even as much as write to the ministries, departments, and agencies that, look, certain things in your office came to us and they were duplicates? It's just an idea that maybe this will also discourage other people with such intentions, as Mr. President has said, to desist going forward.
It's gone even beyond writing them. The ICPC chairman said they were investigating the individuals concerned. And where people are found to have been culpable, to have willfully, for instance, the case for Ministry of Health, we don't know. It seems it was particular, an agency under Ministry of Health, where it seems like, it was a wholesale, whatever, replication of a band of projects, and the officer is claiming that it was a copy and paste situation, where in the process copied and pasted, and then, erroneously copied the wrong whatever and pasted it, and it was duplicated. We don't know. Those are the things that the investigation will reveal. So all I'm just saying is, once you see education, don't presume that somebody has, done so with intent to be fraudulent, because in any case, they know that, in the past years now, we have made the system such that budgetary releases for capital are not done lump sum that you can apply as you please, but are done project by project, that are project specific, that are tied to specific projects. So even if at the point of release, some infraction was found, release will be withheld from such a project.
Kabweze, you've also talked about, as I said earlier, you have mentioned this a number of times, that we have very low revenue for our projects, both recurrent and capital, and a number of people, significant number of people, are complaining about the huge borrowing that we've been making over time. Some say, how sustainable can that be? So at the time that we're battling with low revenue and high debt burden, there are those who are concerned about the debt servicing bill on its own. Is there anything that we can do to reduce the debt burden that we have and shore up the revenue in a way that it is not going to be more burden on the people? What's the plan?
Well, you basically just summarized the plan. The plan is, and that's the priority and the focus, is to grow the revenues. That's a sustainable solution to this. It's not to cut expenditure because, as I said, in aggregate, government is not spending nearly as much as it ought to spend. So on the expenditure side, what we need to do is to focus on increasing efficiencies. Making sure that the limited resources are going to priority areas that there's value for money for the expenditure, but not to cut the aggregate expenditure. That will be interest to the economy at this point in time. And therefore, if that is the case, then the only sustainable solution for us is to grow the revenues. And that's basically, if you ask us on the fiscal side, what our priorities are, we'll say number one, grow revenues, number two, grow revenues, number three, grow revenues.
Well, a number of people will be asking how that will happen without it coming from their pockets even more. But we'll discuss more of that when we return from this break. Just stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Well, Mr. Kabuze, just one question from me. Budget performance has been a concern, even to the president in one of his recent speeches, where he talked about the fact that the assumptions weren't met as significantly as government expected. Is there any likelihood that such will occur again in the budget that we're proposing for the year coming?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure I know which statement of the president that you're referring to. But a budget essentially is an estimate of future revenues and expenditures. And, unless you're God or somehow you have a crystal ball, you can't make those estimates the 100% accuracy. And so it's a degree of deviation between your projections and the actual that then gives rise to what is called a budget credibility measure. So if you're asking, all I can say is, in terms of budget performance, we believe that it's getting better and better. In terms of overall budget performance, in 2020, for the 2020 budget recorded 100% performance of the budget. So 2021, we believe we're on course for 100% performance of the budget also. So
let's talk about the efficiency unit of the ministry. I know that this is under the Ministry of Finance right now, the efficiency unit, and this is about recurrent expenditure. You have also spoken in times past about the size of our recurrent expenditure, which seems to be ballooning. You say that part of that, even though, yes, our salaries have been reviewed and they've gone up and they've caused our recurrent expenditure to balloon, it doesn't account for everything that we see there. Can we really say that the efficiency unit itself has been efficient in terms of spotting out expenditure lines that ought not to be there?
Well, the truth is, the efficiency unit, their job is practically done, unless some new things emerge. But which is basically to review, a comprehensive review of those things and identified areas where. Are
you saying they no longer exist?
No, they exist, but I say their job is substantially done. So I mean, they've come up with. It's when you look at it's not like there's an ever-growing list in terms of items. Their job is not to review the individual. Their job is not to review the individual expenditure estimates of agencies. Their job is to review the nature of the expenditures. So they can look at travel, for instance, and say, why should we, be spending this, this much on travel? So, in the year that and by the way, the reference that the SGF made to certain items accounting for 60%, I think I noticed that in the reporting, people, omitted the time that was situated in a time. He said over a 3-year period from 2012 to 2015. Okay, so when the efficiency unit did that review in 2016, they found that those particular lines that were so heavy in the required, stringent scrutiny. And so they started looking at it, and that gave rise to specification of limits. For instance, how much agencies can spend on, refreshment at meetings and stuff like that. So they put out guidelines like that. How much is allowable for travel, what sort of arrangements could be made. When they looked at it, for instance, they found in one particular year, so much money had been paid to a particular airline on foreign travels. And when they engaged with that airline, it was found that if government took the approach of procuring tickets as government, rather than individuals showing up to buy tickets, government could negotiate, a discounted rate for tickets for its personnel. And so they put such up as this is the way going forward. So that's the kind of work that the efficiency unit does. Efficiency unit doesn't go around, reviewing the, expenditure. There are just a handful of individuals in the expenditure in the efficiency unit.
Okay, so tell us then, what then accounts for the rest of the, figures which we now see in our recurrent expenditure, which is not about personnel costs, but which continues to feature in our recurrent expenditure in such a way that it makes it very heavy?
Well, I mean, we've had double-digit inflation for the last 6 years. So you will expect that, because whether it is for, diesel, that these agencies need to run their offices, whether it's for travel, so inflation is a factor in the growth in recurrent expenditures. And even in your own organization, I'm sure that your recurrent expenditures, continue to grow. What we've done is to try and keep it, keep a lead on it. In aggregate, except allowing for new agencies, there has hardly been a growth, any growth in the aggregate overhead budget. Because when we talk about recurrent expenditure, it's that component of it called overhead. That's what really, around which you have this flexibility to try and control, since the bulk, which is personnel costs, as at the policy level, government has determined that it's not going to retrench anyone. And you cannot then, and government also wants to be able to pay people some decent whatever, and that's why it had to review the minimum wage.
So from where you sit as DG Budget, when you look at our budget lines, when you look at our aggregate, both for capital and recurrent, are you saying that we're totally at an efficient stage in terms of our budget preparation and even perhaps maybe implementation?
No, we're not. Okay.
What are some of the challenges
we would like
see?
to see a lot, a much higher. First of all, up until 2016, there was the government had no policy around, there was no policy and there was no law mandating you to spend any proportion of the budget on capital. In 2016, we came up with a policy to say, going forward, we will allocate at least 30% of the budget to capital. So that's a good starting point, given where we were coming from. Okay, so the thing then is to ensure that you continue as you succeed in growing revenues, that the incremental revenues are deployed more towards the capital budget so that it keeps going. So if you look at our 2022 budget proposal, for instance, the capital component is 32%. Okay, so you keep doing that. But let me make this point also. Not all recurrent spending is bad. Because I think there's a general perception that once you call it recurrent, then it is bad. If you look at the recurrent budget, the biggest contributors to the recurrent budget are ministries of defense, education, and health. Okay, but in these areas, so the salaries of the military personnel, the cost of their operations and whatever, all of that is recurrent spending. Is it needful in our current circumstances? Absolutely. If you look at the budget for Ministry of Health, the ratio of recurrent to capital for the Ministry of Health will be like 5-1, because the doctors and other medical personnel across the hospitals have to be paid. The consumables, keeping the hospitals, cleaning, all of that have to be. These are recurrent spend. Same with education. Okay. However, the truth is, and these are empirical, based on empirical studies. 1 naira spent on health, okay, if properly spent, delivers a higher return on investment to a country than the same 1 naira spent even on building a road.
So we know that.
So the notion that once it's recurrent, it's bad. So you need to strip down the recurrent.
The problem is trust. That's where we currently are at. Ensuring that, trust comes back into the system. Because, just yesterday, again, the CEO of Budget gave an instance about how, I think about 200 billion or so was meant for, I can't remember the exact figure he quoted, but something pretty modest was meant for the development of all the unity schools in Nigeria. And then something utterly ridiculous, about 300 million or so, was meant for building a gym at the headquarters of, say, the Ministry of Education. So there are questions as to when we see this humongous amount or amounts of money allocated to the Ministry of Education and Health, much as people would look at the broad and say, the broad figures and say, yes, we're doing roughly 10% now to our education ministry, which is supposed to be a good thing, or maybe 12 or 15%, assuming we're able to meet the Abuja Declaration, which we all signed up to, 15% to our health sector, which is also supposed to be a good thing. How do we ensure that these monies, when they eventually go there, are used for what they say or what we think is what is going to be used for, not to build gyms and things of the sort when there are still a lot of health needs, when over 3,000 people have died to cholera in Nigeria? That's the question. I don't know whether you have any input into being able to scrutinize, and if it's within your line of work anyway, to scrutinize just what these things are meant for.
Well, you see, at the end of the day, MDAs have some leeway as to what constitutes their priority spending. And look, let's be here. Let's not demonize whatever. See, do you believe that a gym in a workplace is helpful to keeping the people who work there, especially if they work long hours in the office, to keep them healthy? Many private companies.
I'd love a gym in my office.
Perhaps they have in your own. I don't know.
I would love a gym in our office, and yes, some sporting facilities is good. However,
Yes.
When you look at it, priority, I think, is the key word here.
Yes.
When you look at, what we have as needs as a people, and when we look at what, we're currently spending money on, there are gaps, and we must admit that there are gaps. You don't agree?
I do agree. But, that's my starting point. Okay, and I said, these things we keep, we keep pushing to make things better. But all I'm just saying is, let's not make it, sound like it's something really. 300 million naira might sound like a whole lot of whatever, but in terms of the needs of the education sector, and just doing a straight whatever comparison with unity schools. The government has been budgeting and spending money on unity schools for decades, every year, and it's a significant portion of the budget of the Ministry of Education. If in 1 year, and that's a one-off thing, they decide that perhaps their staff did long hours are falling off or knocking off on the job, and it's affecting productivity, and a one-off intervention, let's do a gym. They're not going to be building a gym every year. They're going to continue to spend money on these schools every year. There are 100 of those schools. They've been since maybe even attended one of them.
It should take long walks every Saturday. It does the same work as having a gym. But speaking more seriously, some of the gaps is what we're asking. How your own agency is able to address. And I think another thing that came up, which was very scary, was the revelation by the ICPC chairman about illegal recruitment, that people were illegally recruited. They had even certificates, or how will I put it now, recommendations, fake recommendations from allegedly from the office of the chief of staff to the president. And these people were registered on IPs and brought into the system, sent to ministries to go and work. And all of this, we don't even know. I mean, because these people were, I don't know, they were found somehow. But we don't know that we have been able to find all the people who carry out this illegal recruitment. So there are questions as to whether we're really paying the people that that the Nigerian people agreed to employ.
Well, you're right. And that's why I say that every system basically has self-correcting mechanisms. And at the end of the day, it's human beings. And as I said at that summit, when you have collusion across, different levels that are supposed to check, what each other is doing, it's easy for that to do. But the question is whether there is something for the system to pick it up. Every year, for the personnel budget, the budget office keeps the nominal role of all the agencies. The personnel cost budget for agencies is not a lump sum. It's built up person by person for all of the agencies, and we keep that record. So what happens is when, in the subsequent period, we see a nominal of people who are being paid, we match it off with what we have. And that's how we flag that there's been this number of people added, because we don't have any record that those were properly, there was proper approval for their recruitment, because we will know, because we're part of that process. So we flag it and we throw it up. And then, agencies like SPC pick it up also and try and investigate to find out exactly what has happened and how those people got onto the payroll.
Mm. So, I mean, that is still going on. I don't know how often that is flagged by your office, and how often you've been able to see that within your system. Do you want to shed a little more light on how often that has happened? Whether we should still expect more flagging, or,
Well, as long as there are human beings who in the system, there are people desperate to get jobs and are willing to pay and whatever, and for it. As long as there are people within the system desperate to make more themselves, I cannot sit here and tell you that you won't see any more of it. All I can say to you is that the system exists to spot it when it happens,
okay.
and to be able to catch it and self-correct and to do something about those people.
Just quickly, I just wanted you to speak to an example of an agency that used to be, one that was constantly gulping money, and to one that is now producing a surplus, JAM, for instance. I don't know whether there have been, perhaps an audit of all other agencies which we believe could be self-sustaining to be able to produce a surplus as well. Because I'm sure that if you had asked before now if JAM could produce a surplus, there would have been 1,001 excuses as to why it couldn't produce a surplus. But now that we see that it is possible that an agency can actually produce a surplus, have we been able to sit back to say what other agencies are capable of doing this? Perhaps we should challenge them in this regard. Have there been thoughts around there?
Well, I think I need to, clarify what exactly the situation is, with respect to JAM. And my friend, Professor Lode, has done an excellent job. But first of all, it is not correct that I'm producing a surplus. Because when you say surplus, it means you're producing monies over and above your revenues. The costs, JAM's costs, their staff and all of those are still paid for by government. Mm-hmm. Okay? And so if you take the aggregate of the revenues compared to the aggregate of their costs, it's not a surplus. However, what has happened is that, their costs having been borne by government, the revenues that they generate from their activities in the past, okay, the some individuals in those in the organization would find a way of spending them on items that were not appropriated in the budget. And what Prof has done is put an end to that. If government has borne our costs, if we generate these revenues, if we net out the costs that is directly attributable to the conduct of the exams and whatever, the excess, the surplus over that, which by government fiscal regulations is supposed to be remitted to the Consolidated Revenue Fund, that we will make that remittance. That's basically
what has happened in JAM. So
what
are we
has
saying
happened.
That have we been able to look at other agencies that are capable of doing that? That's the question.
Yes, and if you look at the budget for into 2022 for such agencies, we're not even going to leave it to we're not going to leave it to chance. We now have the capacity from the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation to go into those agencies' accounts.
Can you give us
as those
examples?
No, if you take, for instance, we've started starting with the government-owned enterprises, and that's why this year we're going to top 1 trillion naira in revenues from the surpluses pulled back from the government-owned enterprises. Because now, unlike in the past, when we wait for them to be able to render accounts and remit what is due, now the Federation goes in on a monthly basis to pull out what is due. And so that process is going to be extended now beyond the DOEs to all of the agencies of government that generate IGR.
You still haven't given us an example. I mean, like a name, more specifically, government-owned enterprises such as?
Government-owned enterprises include NPA, NIMASA, FAN. You want more examples? There are 63 of them captured in the budget. You want the list of
lots of mails already on your on your appearance. Even a few of them have questions, which we're totally out of time to take now. But I guess you'll always come back again because matters around our budget are never ending. We have to thank you for coming on this morning. Dr. Ben Akabweze is the Director General of the Budget Office and has been telling us just how the budget preparation goes and some of the controversies that have arisen as a result of budget preparation. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Today this morning.
It's my pleasure.
The program continues in a moment. Please stay with us.
Plenary of the week in the Green Chamber. The session commences with a communication from President Muhammadu Buhari on the finance bill for consideration and passage.
It details what the finance bill is about, which we will circulate to members. I trust that the bill will be favorably considered by the National Assembly for passage into law so that it may provide fiscal support necessary for the implementation of the 2022 federal budget.
An urgent motion in response to rumors that it will cost 500 billion naira to conduct direct primaries is raised. This is coming on the heels of the disagreement among the political class on the insistence of the National Assembly through the recently passed Electoral Act Amendment Bill that political parties must conduct their primaries using the direct method.
It is important for us to invite the chairman of INEC to meet with the committee of INEC in this Allo chamber and that of appropriation for him to be able to tell them what is going to cost to do this direct primaries.
In the meantime, following the statement by Chairman of the Independent Corrupt Practices Commission that over 250 projects have been found to be duplicated in the proposed 2022 budget and illegal recruitment in MDAs, lawmakers call for an investigation.
Concerned that these corrupt practices have diverted the country's revenue meant to be channeled into economic development and capital projects.
Let the standing committees check all their capital projects and find out. And Mr. Speaker, let me also add, apart from capital, Mr. Speaker, they should go beyond that and review the overhead.
Investigate the level of approvals or waivers for employment for the past 5 years that have been given by the head of service since the policy or since the ban on employment.
The House mandates the Committee on Anti-Corruption to investigate the issues of nominal roles, payroll padding and fake employment in all MDAs, while it plans to set up an ad hoc committee to investigate the issue of duplication of projects in the coming week. Terry Ikumi, Channels Television News.
Well, from matters of the budget now to, well, it's also around budgets as well, because we must budget for how we're going to implement our laws. And if the Electoral Act is passed by the National Assembly, it's already before the president, and the president, we understand, is considering it. He's written a letter to INEC to guide or to recommend, we understand, on whether or not he should go ahead with the signing of the budget. Now there are talks around what it would cost, because it would seem that the most contentious item right now is direct primaries, the mode through which parties will elect or select their candidates. The Electoral Act is prescribing that direct primaries be the way to go. In the past, it used to be left to the discretion of the parties who picked either direct or indirect primaries. But this Electoral Act, as amended, is now being specific. Well, it's not an act yet, it's a bill going to, propose to the president to sign. The amendment has been passed by the National Assembly, but it's not yet signed into law, that direct primaries be the way to go. There's going to be a cost attached to that. And figures are already flying around. Figures that have now prompted the House of Representatives to invite INEC to come and, shed light on it. But there are questions as to whether, when we hear figures, flying in the rumor mill, should we just invite INEC based on that? We have with us this morning Honorable Leke Abejide, who is the Chairman, House Committee on Customs and Excise, also member representing Yagba East, Yagba West, Mokbamuro Federal Constituency, and representing, is elected on the platform of the ADC in Kogi State. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you for having me, and good morning, Nigerians.
Well, you moved that motion on the floor of the House based on, so we'll say hearsay. We know that INEC has been speaking on what it will need to conduct direct primaries, but we haven't exactly heard it mention money. So where did this figure of 500 billion naira come out from? Where did you hear it from?
Thank you. Everybody, majority agree that this electoral bill, as passed by the National Assembly, if signed into law by the president, will be the best that will ever happen to this country. Because it will open the political space for the youth, for the majority of the masses who want to partake in selecting in the leadership recruitment process, but don't have the opportunity. The issue of cost, if you listen to, I listened to analysis even on channels, that people are saying it's going to be very expensive, it's going to cost a lot of money, that Nigeria doesn't have that kind of money now. And not quite long, people start banditing that there are lots of costs in form of 500 billion naira that is going to cost Nigeria to be able to conduct direct primaries, that INEC need a lot of personnel even. I want to say that INEC is not going to conduct this direct primary in every polling unit. It is only the wards. And right now, they have their staff across all the 774 local governments. For example, in my local government, I have only 10 wards. And I want to tell you that INEC have staff that can go around these 10 wards. And if you want to, and I have 82 polling units in my local government. So it's not polling unit by polling, it's ward by ward. And if INEC has not even come out and say, this is the amount it will cost them if they want to do it themselves, how can somebody be talking of costs that will be a stumbling block from President assenting into this bill?
Well, the president has written to INEC. The president has asked INEC for its guidelines, for it, to be a guide of some sort. And one would imagine that, the president is not going to rely on rumor mill. Why are we so concerned about the cost at this point?
Those people peddling these rumors, they have ulterior motive. You cannot say. They must have also filtered into the president's ear. So the president should not sign.
Is that the fear? The fear is that the rumor might have gotten to the president's ear and could prevent him from signing. Is that why the House of Reps is inviting INEC?
Yes. That is why now it's very timely. You know why? The budget is still with the National Assembly. If we look at the cost implication, and it is within what we can still undo with the budget of INEC, it will be added to the INEC budget so that the leadership recruitment process in Nigeria can be the best you can find around. What I mean is that if we don't allow the people to participate, we will continue to have problems. If you look at parties, why is it that they are finding it difficult to conduct congresses and conventions? It's because of the fear after the congresses, there will be fallout. Those people that are the money, they believe when you are not part of those who will decide who will go for other governorship or the presidential or House of Reps or senators, then you can make it. That is the meaning. So, but if you leave it open for people to participate, it will not be a business as usual.
But you are from a minority party, and from what we have heard, this is also going to affect minority parties adversely, because there have been talks around how the minority parties have been saying, oh, this direct primaries is going to stifle us. We do not have the funds to be able to conduct direct primaries.
And that is what I'm talking about.
But you seem to be in support of direct primaries.
I'm in support of direct primary. I did direct primary in my party. And do you know why? Let me say this. Those that are against direct primary today, I don't know, governors have come out that they are not against direct primary, but initially we heard that they are against direct primary. Tomorrow, they will be the ones singing this song, that direct primary is the way to go. You know why? When they leave this power, most of them now are jostling to come to Senate. When they leave this power and come to Senate, even though if they hand over to their children, they will find it difficult to control that children when the power gets into their hand. So they may try to shut them out as well. So you will see that when they come to Senate or later, they will now be thinking, we have done the best for them. Because nobody will be able to shut you out. As long as you are popular, you are on ground, you will continue to win your elections. I want to tell you.
So you tell me where they complained about small parties saying that this is going to stifle them and kill them. Where is it coming from?
Well, how many small parties have candidates or have electoral, elected officials, either in the National Assembly or at the state level? How many of them? I think now in the House of Rep, when you take APC, you take PDP, you take CAPGA, EDC, there's no other party again. Those ones that came on PRP and the SDP, you can't find them anymore. So why is the complaint?
What happened to them?
They have all decamped. They have all decamped.
Why haven't you decamped?
These small parties that are talking...
I want to ask you why you haven't decamped.
I have not decamped because, you see, in my place, in my own constituency, actually, it is because of what I'm doing that makes me to win election. It's not actually the party. Because people, majority, especially the old women, they don't even know my party. They only ask, where it's, I want to speak my language now, my dialect, Omoli Waiki. That is the man that is paying white. So that is, if you are popular, you work yourself to the mind of the masses, you keep on making it. So I have not decamped because my party is not yet in crisis. If my party is in crisis, what will I be doing? I will have decamped.
Okay. Well,
to any of the bigger parties or ABGA.
I know that you told me that, you told me behind the scenes that a few of your own colleagues have decamped and your party, you say, is not in crisis. On what basis then were they accepted into the other parties?
Well, in my state, we are not in crisis. Maybe in their state. It's possible in their state, like my colleague from Ogun State, he said that there was a lot of crisis and the majority of his members defected. So what is he doing? So he has to join them. So, but in my own state, we are still one.
Okay, so you don't think that this is going to be a huge burden on your party?
It's not going to be a huge burden. I have told you, INEC is going to spend...
No, on your own party, on ADC, it's not going to be a huge burden to conduct direct primaries in all the 36 states of the Federation, because it's not only in Kogi that ADC exists, I imagine.
It's not going to be able to... See, the money they are even spending on indirect primaries is far, far more than what they will spend on direct primary. Let me tell you, for example, let me give Kogi State as an example. When Ibro, the former governor, wanted to leave, he brought out a candidate. And there are other candidates too that came, some of them very, very rich. When they discovered that, okay, Ibro is earning 600,000 per delegate, the other candidate increased his own to, I think, 900,000.
You have that information?
I have that information. I was on grounds.
Were you in that party then? Were you in?
I was in PDP then. I was in PDP then. So the cost at the end of the day, I have not, let me learn. After that primary, the people who collected, when they had, after collecting 600,000 from this candidate, they had their sharing 900,000 from another place, they went there, collected the 900. Another person sharing 500, they went there, collected the 500. So for them not to cause problem, most of them didn't vote, they just went out secretly. Some went to where they're selling cars, bought cars, go home. So these are the things. In direct primary, you don't need to camp anybody. I mean, in direct primary, you don't need to camp anybody and start giving money. You don't need it. Once you are popular on ground, let me tell you, in my constituency today, if I say I want to contest, I would primarily want to, people will troop out without me giving them anything. Because I have been doing well for them. So it's not...
By doing well for them, it's about implementing projects, right? Not about what you're doing for them in the House of Representatives.
Before I came to government, I declared secondary schools in my place free. I was paying school fees free. You go to school, only have uniform. Then when I came in, I promised I would pay WAEC. People say, it's a politician talks that way. I said, okay. Even before going to government, I would pay. And I did so. When I paid, the second year when I came in, my first year in government, that would be the second time I'll be paying the WAEC. The private owners of secondary schools came to me and said, people are withdrawing their children from public schools. They're not from private school, taking them to public school because of the WAEC that I'm paying. That I should please add the private school. And I added the private schools. I now pay for both private and public schools. So that is to tell you that they know if I say this, that's what I will do. It makes you to be popular as a politician. So and not only that.
It is true, but what I'm trying to say is that is outside of your responsibility as a House of Reps member. The House of Reps members' responsibility is to make laws, is to oversight, and also to represent his people in the House of Representatives.
You have not said it. Represent your people. Represent your people does not mean the way I spoke on the floor. That is the representation. Indeed. You cannot go home except you make life meaningful also for them. If you say, okay, I want to sponsor a bill, I want to move motion. I moved so many motions. I sponsor a bill. So is that what they will eat at home? In Nigeria context, politics is not. That is not what the people at home consider as representation. What they consider as representation, what impact can you make in their lives?
Does it not bring a burden to you as a...
Of course, yes. It brings a lot of burden, not only to me, to all my colleagues as well. But if you don't do it, you cannot come back.
So if that is the situation, how is direct primaries now going to help anything? How is a young man, for instance, who is perhaps just working, because I imagine that you were a businessman before you went into politics. Is that correct?
Of course, yes.
And so you were a man of means for you to be able to pay WAEC fees for all your people before you came to the House of Representatives. Yes. So imagine somebody who really has a desire to serve, but doesn't really have that wherewithal, that financial wherewithal. Doesn't it already, exclude that person if he or she doesn't have money?
That is what I'm telling you. It is even the direct primary that will give room for those kind of people. Indirect primary, they can never make it. Where would they get 1 million naira to give to one delegate to vote for them? Where would they get it? But this now, if people know you as a credible person, as a person who is respected in the society, not in a matter of money, that they know that when you get there, you will represent them well. People will vote for you in your primary without giving them anything.
Are you sure? Because you just said
and
that
again,
in our Nigerian context, it will not work. You said that yourself. No,
it's going to work for direct primary, but it's not going to work. In my own case, when I did the direct primary, I didn't know most of those people who voted for me. So how can I give them money? I did not even spend a dime to give anybody. Anybody, when they ask me that today is primary, whatever they are going to get, I say, for me, I don't have money to give you. If you want to vote for me, you vote for me. If you don't vote for me, you leave it.
So this 500 billion now that you're saying that we should invite INEC over, the INEC chairman over. If he does come to say that 500 billion is how much it's going to cost, this is just for example. Do you think that would be too steep a cost for us to include in our budget just because we want to conduct direct primaries?
Whatever it costs us to have a quality leadership recruitment, the advantage or the advantages far outweigh the disadvantages. Why is it that we're having problems today? It's because of the leadership people. I've listened to channels almost, I watch channels, but even my last child, they all know that I watch channels day in, day out. I don't miss Sunrise Daily and I don't miss Politics Today. So I have listened to people talking about leadership recruitment process in this country that is wrong. So why don't we once and for all correct this? So, and I believe, and you will hear, let the elect chairman, we have done our own independent investigation. It's far less compared to what they are talking about.
What's the figure from your own investigation?
Maybe we should wait for our next chairman to see it. But I am sure is far, far less.
Okay, let's go to Lagos now. I understand my colleague Ayo has questions for you. Ayo.
Well, Honorable, it would seem like you almost took the question right out of my mouth, saying, you know, what kind of estimate should we be looking at? But INEC, I mean, according to from the conversations we've had with Mr. Festus Okoye, who is the National Commissioner and Chairman of the Information for INEC, has said that, well, it might be a little difficult to execute because that means that, just as you said, they have to deploy personnel to all the wards, maybe not all at the same time for all the political parties, but all the wards all over the nation. So in terms of taking action on these direct primaries when eventually the president signs or the bill becomes law, did the National Assembly also factor in the personnel costs at the time that the law was being passed?
Thank you so much. Well, that's what I'm saying, that when the INEC chairman comes, he'll be able to tell us what is going to
If the National Assembly considered the personnel,
don't forget that
I'm asking if the National Assembly considered the number of personnel that will be required for INEC to execute the direct primaries.
yes, I said it from the beginning of this conversation, that INEC already has staff across all the 774 local governments. It's not that they are just going to look for staff. They have staff that go, and don't forget, the election, the primary election is going to take place only in the wards, not polling unit. Even when we are doing the general election that is polling unit by polling unit, INEC has staff that go around this polling unit. Like my local government now, for example, I have 82 polling units. And you will see all INEC staff in all the 82 polling units. But now in this primary, it's only 10 wards. So those INEC staff that are spread across these 82 polling units, we only work in 10 wards. So they have the personnel already. It's not that they are going to add more cost to that.
But don't forget that INEC has often said that most of the time when they have to, perform all of these activities, they use ad hoc staff, which have to be paid as well. So that's why I'm asking, I mean, how many, INEC cannot have full staff of up to 10 per ward at any given time. How many people do you expect that the National Assembly, for instance, factoring would be required to monitor or to at least observe the primaries at each of these wards that you're talking about?
Well, I'm not the INEC staff, but I want to know, even though INEC is going to need additional staff, they will only need very, very little. No, we have army of unemployed youth in Nigeria. It's also an avenue to even employ more people. I believe that even though they're going to add more staff to themselves, it's going to be very little. It's not going to be more.
What was the position of the House Committee on INEC about this? What were the recommendations made by the House Committee on INEC about this direct primary before it was finalized?
It's in the public domain. It's beyond the committee. The committee did their job, and they brought it to the plenary, and it was unanimously passed that direct primaries would be the way to go. So it's not the committee this time around. It is the whole House now that pass it and then send it to the president for assent, which I believe the president himself will not have reason to hold assent because he is a product of direct primary. And is a man that wants the people, the general populace, to participate in political processes. So I believe the president, you can see, everybody is speaking in support. Even those governors that were against before, they are now in support. I told you just something, maybe you didn't listen, that even the current governors, you will see when they come to the National Assembly, in the next dispensation, they will be happy that even the direct primary is the best. Because at that time, some of them will be finding it difficult to even go to their own state. Look at what happened in Gombe State. Here, Senator in Gombe State, Senator Goji cannot even go home. His own godson made it impossible for him to go home. And this is what you can know. For those now that think they are going to put their own very loyal person, it's going to be the same way. You will find out that even your own godson will shut you out. He will not want you to come back to National Assembly. But if you are on ground, nobody, no governor or no any senator can say you should not come back. Because once the people want you, the people's will prevail.
We also note that direct primary is not exactly an INEC responsibility. What the INEC is going to go and do is observe. It is the responsibility of the parties to conduct their own primaries. Isn't that correct?
It was correct before this bill was passed. But now, INEC has a responsibility now. That is why I'm telling you that...
So you're saying that in the new bill, as passed by the National Assembly,
yes,
INEC is the one going to conduct the direct primary?
Yes, INEC is the one going to conduct the direct primary. INEC will be the one, the votes will count. It's not that somebody will sit down in his room and just write names and pass it and say they have conducted direct primary.
So it is not that INEC is going to go and observe anymore?
It's beyond being observed at this time. That is why you see people are fighting against it, because they know there is going to be real election, real primary election. It's not a matter of observing. Why is it that we ask INEC to take charge? It's because people have abused even the direct primary they did before. People will just sit down and write names and put figures. See what happened in Anambra State recently, where the figure that the candidate got, he could not even get maybe 1/4 of it in the really, because somebody just sat down and write the names and put the figure out. If INEC is in charge and conduct this primary, it will never be so. The vote will count.
We're not increasing INEC's responsibility before the actual elections itself?
See, all electoral processes supposed to belong to INEC. It's supposed to belong to INEC.
Even including the one that the parties by themselves should be able to conduct?
Even who registered these parties? Who registered these parties? Is it not INEC? The parties were registered by INEC. Yeah, why is it that now I license you, then you want to be my boss?
The manner in which we're going at this rate, it would seem that we'll soon invite INEC to conduct the business of parties for us as well.
Can't you see that it's better for us? Look at the way INEC is improving these days. People now have confidence. People that don't want to play politics. People like me, I didn't want to play politics. This last election, I didn't want to contest. It was pressure. Before I actually accepted, I didn't want to go. And when I agreed to go, PDP agreed to that I should come and take the ticket. And I said, I don't want that ticket. Let me look for another party. And we brought in ADC. You understand? Because of the confidence we saw in that election, I believe vote will count. And vote actually counted. Now, if you don't perform, forget it. You can't make it again.
Honorable Leke, perhaps what you're saying is your own personal suggestion. Maybe that's your own understanding. But from what we understand of that particular bill, INEC is still supposed to be an observer, not the one conducting the primaries.
See, INEC is going to be beyond being an observer. See,
that's the expectation you're having. That's the expectation.
And that is how it's going to be.
Okay, well, let us wait and see what eventually happens. But from those who should know and those who know, they say that, INEC is only going to be an observer. We'll see eventually how things pan out. We have to thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. We continue to wish you all the best as you represent your people in Kogi State. We've been speaking with Honorable Leke Abejide, who is the Chairman House Committee on Customs and Excise and also a member representing Yagba East, Yagba West, Mukbamuro Federal Constituency, and was elected on the platform of the ADC in Kogi. You're welcome. Thank you once again for coming on Sunrise Daily.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, we have a few mails now. A few of the mails we have now. Louis Afolabi on direct primary says, my take is that those who are against direct primaries have some hidden fears on the impact it can have on their political interest. But the truth is that any process of election that can make Nigerians to vote quality candidates to lead Nigeria at all levels should be supported regardless of the cost. Nigeria's problem is simply leadership recruitment process. And if direct primaries will solve this problem, so be it.
Gabriel Weham on the same issue says, one wonders why we're not even looking at the direction of independent candidacy. Those against direct primary are afraid of true democracy. Well, the independent candidacy, I guess you're looking for an amendment to the law.
Well, Professor Enakin are talking about the national budgeting process. As 40% of our national budget goes to recurrent expenditure, 30% goes to debt servicing and loan repayments, and 30% goes to capital expenditures. Patent corruption has become a burden for our national development.
Well, so many other messages that we could take, but we are totally out of time. Ejimbe Bernard, Ejikeze, Austin Aikpo, and Olorun Loba Adeni, thank you all so much for your mails. We do not take them for granted. That's the show today. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful day and weekend ahead. I'm Ayo.
It's the week. And indeed, Ayo. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great weekend. I'm Malkwell Yusuf.